Kia ora Aotearoa. Good evening and welcome to the Union Report, where we review the news week through the lens of industrial disputes with union leaders, commentators and politicians. Joining me tonight to discuss events is President of the Engineering, Printing and Manufacturing Union, Bill Newsom, and the Issues Director for the Greens, former Alliance Party leader and Cabinet Minister, Laila Hari. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, the average salary for CEOs is now $1.5 million, showing the gap between the richest and lowest paid New Zealanders is still stark. How do we grow wages and what is the role of unions? Issue 2, Australian Fairfax journalists are involved in industrial action as jobs are moved to New Zealand. Do unions stand in solidarity with their Australian counterparts, or do they welcome jobs for their members? And Issue 3 tonight, what will the latest ERA changes mean, and will the government be more conciliatory in the wake of the education unions' win over classroom sizes? Plus, we'll wrap with a final thought, but let's start the show with Issue 1. Last week, New Zealand's Herald CEO salary survey found the average salary for 2011 was $1.5 million, whereas working 40 hours per week on the minimum wage will get you just over $30,000 a year. How do we deal with this low wage legacy? Laila, New Zealand is now ranked in the OECD at 23 out of 30 for income inequality. Is the egalitarian New Zealand myth dead, and can it be brought back?
Well, it can be brought back, but it will require unions and others to organise to lift people who are on wages that are currently way too low, but also to look at extremely high wages, because the gap between rich and poor gets bigger both by the poor becoming poorer and by the rich becoming richer.
How do we do that?
Well, I think unions have a very important role to play. We know that when unions go out and organise among low-paid groups of workers, like retail workers and the work that was done by the National Distribution Union, now First Union, we know that there is plenty of spare capacity by employers to improve wages if workers organise and say that they want a better deal. So it's not that these businesses can't afford to pay people more. They can, but we have seen such a loss of negotiating power among workers that even those who could be paid more are accepting minimum wage levels. So much better environment for collective bargaining is the bottom line.
Who's responsible for that weakening of the unions' negotiating power?
Well,
is it Labour or is it National? Because the 9 years of Labour, at the end of it, one of the great ironies is the unions seemed weaker at the end of 9 years of Labour.
Well, I'd like to say it was just a problem of political parties. It started with the National Government's Employment Contracts Act in 1991. But workers actually made a choice not to join unions and not to organise in their own interests. So it's also a challenge to workers and to those who are advocating for workers is to be more effective in getting together and stand up for their rights at work. I mean, we've seen it in a number of recent disputes where low paid, in some cases, workers and sometimes more highly paid workers have been strongly defending their right to organise and their right to a decent standard of living at work. So yes, it started with the Employment Contracts Act. It didn't get a whole lot better with the Employment Relations Act, but in the end we also have to look at ourselves and say, are we letting this happen to us by not getting together and organising?
Do you think we need civics classes for that next generation who are growing up who know nothing about the workers' struggle or the fight for rights and responsibilities in society? Do you think we need actually a civics course back in schools so that people are actually aware of this at all?
Well, one that actually told the truth.
Well, clearly,
would be a good start, and I don't know whether the current government would put that on the curriculum. I think so, yes.
Bill, the richest 150 people in New Zealand grew their wealth by 20% in 2010, while wages moved by less than 2%. What does the union movement need to do to start forcing those wages up?
Well, let's dig a bit deeper into some of those figures. 2%, you're right, that's the labour cost index. That's an average. Do you know something like half of workers, according to that research, got nothing?
Right.
So an average, of course, is the average of larger and smaller figures. 45% got nothing. There's no evidence that correlates to them having some extraordinary large increase the year before.
Sure.
So what we've got is this emergence, if you like, it's been there for a while, of working poor, very low paid. some evidence came through, you've touched on it, CEOs in the top companies, 11% average salary increases in the last 12 months, the 12 months to March. That's not their at-risk package.
Right.
That's what they paid themselves.
Yeah,
not all employers, and we've got to be a bit careful about it.
Yep.
And that was mirrored in the board fees. The board directors' average increase in fees was 11%. Quite an uncanny correlation there. So there's certainly different messages for different people.
Yeah.
What are we doing about it? Well, let's face it, we've had 20 years through both long-term national and Labor-led governments, 20 years of enterprise-based bargaining, individual agreements. It just hasn't got us anywhere. It's not working.
Yeah.
We need a whole new bargaining framework. We need stronger bargaining laws, not weaker bargaining laws. We're about to be attacked again.
Yes.
And, we do need to have this dialogue. It's got to go wider than unions, and I really applaud the work that the Service Workers Union has led up with its Living Wage Aotearoa campaign, and we're very heavily involved in that with them. And that's about getting the dialogue out wider than just union, so that there's a much wider understanding that the current system isn't working.
Lila, the top 1% of earners has more wealth than the entire bottom 60%. When the inequality is that far out, how do you rein in political influence of the wealthy?
With a lot of difficulty, as we've seen over the last few years, but I think it does take political courage, and I do think that there are political parties now who are ready to tackle some of the holy grails of the 1980s and 1990s. In the last election, Labor was proposing a capital gains tax after the Greens had proposed similarly over many years. Now that's one of the, one of the ways that you can actually reduce the rich-poor gap, because of course the capital gains tax starts to take back some of the wealth from those who, because they already had lots of money, have been able to make more. And so, that would result in a fairer and broader based tax system. And tax policy is extremely important. And I think that there are political parties now who are a lot more courageous than certainly the sort of Labor-led centre-left was, even in the last 9 years of government under Labor.
Is it a little outrageous that 25 years ago the top tax rate in this country was 66 cents in the dollar? That's dropped to 33 cents in the dollar in just 25 years. The richest New Zealanders have effectively had their tax rate halved, but that hasn't been shared around with anyone else.
No.
Why is that the case? Why aren't we seeing much more political attempt to rein in their power?
Well, I think we are, but I think that the difficulty for Labor was that it led the charge, and it led the charge in the mid-1980s with the Rogernomics period, and it's been a very difficult struggle for them to shift their economic thinking and their thinking about fairness and wealth distribution. But that also comes back to what people are demanding. There's like this level of acceptance now about what is, as the figures you've quoted show, an unacceptable gap between the wealthiest and the poorest New Zealanders. And we know that the bigger the wealth gap, the more likely everybody is to experience problems with access to health, to education. You inevitably get higher crime rates and personal security issues. There isn't a single thing that I think people would generally agree is important to people that is better in a country that has a big rich-poor gap. Everything is better in countries where there is less of a gap between the wealthy and the poorest members of society. And so, that has to be one of our objectives, and the tax system's an important part of it.
Bill, the argument will be that in a recession, workers are lucky to get what they've got. So do we just have to accept the 250,000 kids in poverty until the economic conditions get better? Do we just have to wait?
No, we don't. There's a lot we can do, and the figures we talked about before about people who get to pick their own pay rises shows that we can certainly do better. Look, can I just take that back a bit? We can do better, but we need a strategy. We need a national strategy. And just to get back to that policy discussion you were having a few seconds ago, You know, another thing that that Labor put on the table was a review of monetary policy, and you know, if we're going to talk about improving wages in this country, we do need stronger bargaining laws. All independent international evidence backs that up. But we also need a real strategy for high-value jobs, and particularly manufacturing. And our exporters, our manufacturing exporters, just get hammered with this exchange rate, this loony kind of exchange rate seesaw. There seems to be no strategy, no willingness to even look at it. Well, that was put on the table by Phil Goff, and we were very, looking forward to that discussion.
Sure.
Because employers need a hand, frankly. Well, some of them are giving themselves a hand into their own pockets, but they need a hand, and we're having an upsurge, and that's no exaggeration, of redundancies just in the last few months. So it's getting harder. We don't have to put up with it. Unions can't do it on their own. We do need to reach out to the community, political parties, and we need to change that whole framework of how we engage with employers and increase wages.
Question to both of you. Some bankers at the height of the boom that crashed the global economy were earning billions in bonuses. At what point does it stop being about economics and it becomes one of morals? Is it immoral to earn $1 billion?
Yeah, I reckon.
Yeah?
I think that people make choices about the kind of societies they want to build and create, and the behaviour that leads to those sorts of wealth packages is one that well, I think all of us would find pretty morally reprehensible. I think it is immoral.
Is it immoral to earn $1 billion?
I'll give it a shot and let you know. I don't know. It certainly depends on what you do with it and how you got it. I think. But I wouldn't mind giving it a shot and doing a bit of research.
I don't think bankers deserve that much. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2. The Australian Journalists Union, who are part of the Media Entertainment and Arts Alliance, have started industrial action in the wake of Fairfax wanting to move work to New Zealand. Is it solidarity or jobs? Bill, how does the EPM respond to this, and how does the wider union movement respond to it?
Look, it's difficult. Can I say we're very close mates with the MEA and Chris Warren, and we're in close dialogue with them over this. Our Journalists Council has sent a strong message of solidarity and support, and that's been responded to with much appreciation through meetings of those journalists. So no, we're very close, and we support them in their discussions they're going through. It's a bit difficult in a soundbite to talk about the type of work, and there's a proposal on the table now put up by the MEA. They put a proposal up based on how we do it here, funnily enough, in Fairfax in New Zealand with the sub-hubs. That's being looked at, and the company will respond later this week. If the jobs came here, would we want to organise them? Yeah, sure. That's our role in society. That's what that's what Lila was talking about before. We've got to organise and bargain, and we have to play our part in the Trans-Tasman relationship by doing whatever we can to make sure we're not the low wage option for Australian companies. It is happening. There's more to it with the restructuring going on in Fairfax than simply
cheaper labour.
Cheaper labour, but there's an element of that in there.
Sure. Lila, this would please Bill English's heart, wouldn't it? I mean, this is the positives of a low-wage economy. Jobs move here because we have cheaper labour costs. This is the free market triumphing, isn't it?
Well, I don't know the details of the dispute in Australia, and Bill has said it's not just about lower labour costs. So I do think we have to be, accurate about the facts, and I don't want to comment on that. But I also think workers and unions, and we do generally, have to look at issues around how work is done and productivity and so on. And I don't know these particular circumstances, but often issues arise from restructuring where there is a genuine drive to improve productivity. But what continuously happens is that the workers are not seeing the benefits of productivity drives, and that can turn people off, and productivity has become a dirty word in a lot of workplaces because it's seen as working harder, producing more for the boss, and
you get nothing out
getting
of it,
nothing out of it, or even losing your job as a result. But you know, I think it's fair to say that every sort of successful country that's growing and so on continuously tackles issues around improving productivity. And it's how you distribute the benefits of that and how you invest the benefits of productivity in growing more good jobs. And that's where, you know, Bill's point about monetary policy, investment policy, research and development are all vitally important, because you know, who wants to do a low grade, low quality, low productivity job all their life? We now have people who are entering the workforce in jobs that, you know, are might be reasonable entry jobs, but staying in those jobs for 40 years without getting a return on the experience and skill they develop and the improved productivity they bring to their employers.
Bill, the MEAA had a role to play in the manufactured crisis at the Hobbit, that farce that happened here. But can Australian hard-nosed tactics work in New Zealand when unions here are far weaker than they are across the Tasman?
They have their own challenges in Australia, our comrade unions. We're very close to a range of Australian unions. It's one of our key strengths, as are other unions. We just have so much tied up in our fraternal relationships with Australian unions. They're very helpful to us, as we are to them. And you know, it was actually talking about the MEA. Chris Warren, who's their national secretary, a hell of a nice guy, a real gentleman, really, and it was quite revolting. I actually apologised to him on behalf of New Zealanders for how he was maligned. It was
a terrible episode, wasn't it?
That sort of racism displayed against him because he was Australian, as well as a union official.
Yes,
sort of doubly damned.
Yeah, that's right.
Got off the track a bit, but. Yeah, it was a terrible dispute, that. And let's look at that dispute. The government decided it could move overnight and change the law to meet an objective. For a corporate. Well, there's plenty, getting back to your point before about what we can do. We can do a lot of things if there's a willingness to do it. There was certainly a willingness to carry the bags for Warner Brothers. And they got limousines and a free feed out of it as well. We don't need the limousine and the free feed.
You do it half the price. Lila, it was threats of international blacklisting of Ports of Auckland that helped bring them back to the table. Is the response to globalisation stronger alliances with more unions around the Pacific and Australia?
Certainly alliances make a huge difference, especially when workers are in, you know, real trouble. I know that, you know, when the NDU and the EPMU were involved in the lockout of the 600 warehouse workers at Progressive Enterprises back in 2006, the real turnaround in that campaign came with the, you know, strong interest being shown by Australian transport unions. The fact that Progressive, of course, were having to import a lot of their goods, and risks of industrial action in Australia and at the ports. So there's no question that that kind of international link and solidarity makes a huge difference to the power of workers in any country to advocate their interests.
A final question to both of you. Will we see Australian unions merging with New Zealand unions as the economy gets tighter? Do you think that'll...
I think in relationships will form, you know, much more than just loose comradeship. Whether we see full-on amalgamations, I don't know, but certainly these sort of things could happen. Look at the MEA. That's a form of it. We've got very, very close EPMU, very, very close relationships. So close that we're just constantly doing business with each other with a range of Australian unions.
So would amalgamation be a possibility?
Oh, well, look, we talk about it. And then we sort of think about the politics involved internally and have another beer, you know. Look, can I say there's a large degree of cooperation, and look, why not? The multinationals are doing it.
Of course.
When we do it, we get slagged off at, you know, for being unpatriotic or something. Well, look, you know, the benefits for Kiwi workers and Australian workers are manifold. Look at the MUNS dispute. I think you had Gary on your show. Great example. Pike River. Man, the Australian Miners' Union just came through for us. They were there on the spot.
Amalgamations, we're going to start seeing them?
I think amalgamations are the least likely option. I mean, the industrial relations environment's really different in the two countries. The culture is very different. I certainly know from the unions I've been involved in that, you know, these are often unions with very high rates of Māori and Pacific members in, you know, in sectors like, you know, retail, distribution, transport and so on in New Zealand. And I think it would be hard to retain the New Zealand identity within some of these unions. I mean, if you take retail, the biggest Australian union is actually the Retail Workers Union. They've been stunningly successful there, and they do great things, but culturally they're a very different union from First Union here, who organise retail workers. So I think it's great that there's collaboration, people share ideas, we've got a lot of trans-Tasman employers and we need to have common strategies. But I don't know if amalgamation would work from an organisational point of view or really empower members, and that's what, you know,
at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, right? Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, the latest ERA changes that National want to implement to further weaken unions' bargaining power were announced last month, but in the wake of the larger classroom size fiasco, is the government still willing to start a war? Lila, is the government licking its wounds or preparing to start a new fight with unions?
I think that the government, you know, has delayed quite a lot of these changes. It actually went into the 2008 election with a more aggressive industrial relations agenda and then didn't implement most of that during the last term of government. This time round they've said that they are going to do some of that stuff. And the interesting thing about the policies they've picked, they're ones that they're not going to impact on the best organised existing groups of unionised workers. They're going to impact on the workers who haven't had a chance to organise yet. They're going to make it harder for workers to even get a first step in the door of collective bargaining. And that's interesting. They're not targeting the well-organised, they're targeting the unorganised, and they want to put a barrier between them and trade unions. So unfortunately the workers they're targeting by definition have the least power of any workers in this society.
Bill, big changes here. How will allowing an employer to walk away from negotiations and removing collective agreements after 30 days help drive wages up? How's it going to do that?
Well, it's not designed to drive wages up. That's the whole point. You would think we had an out-of-control kind of raging wage-led inflation problem in this country if the government has to spend its time looking at these changes. They will impact. I agree with Lila's point about the unorganised, you know, making it harder to get organised. It will also impact on our collective bargaining. But you know, the whole underlying basis of our wage setting system, and it has been like this for 20 years, is if you're strong enough, you get something, and if you're not strong enough, you just take the crumbs that are thrown on you.
Right.
And you know, so if you're strong enough and you're in a strategic sector, well then whatever laws, you know, we're going to do all right. I guess the removal of the good faith provision around the duty to conclude, that takes us back to the 1990s. Some of us are grey-haired enough to have lived those days, and so that allows employers essentially to walk away from collective agreements and collapse them. And we can speculate about where MUNs would have got on the Auckland waterfront without the duty to conclude.
Yes, that's right, that's right.
The first 30 days, the ability for a new employee to choose or to be on the collective agreement while the arrangement is decided. Now, of course, from day one, it can be the individual agreement. We'll marry that with the 90-day unfair dismissal law.
That's right.
And you know,
if
you
choose
really
to be a union worker, there's the door.
I'm sorry, but that's the obvious sign.
Lila, what is driving National to find conflict with unions? I mean, the employment laws are pretty much already in the boss's favour. Why provoke it with the unions? Are they needing to do this to bolster their own supporters?
I find that a very difficult question to answer, and in fact, you know, and I've been away from New Zealand for a couple of years, and I think things have really deteriorated in terms of the government's attitude to people and to ordinary working people in this country over that time. But certainly when the government first came into power, you know, you had the beginning of the global financial crisis. There was a willingness by unions and employers and government to work together. There was the Jobs Summit. There really was a sense of possibility, I think, that there might be some really sort of strong partnerships develop, and there might be a national kind of strategy to tackle this crisis. And it just seems that as they've relaxed on the job and got really comfy in the positions, that they've lost touch with that possibility of bringing people together to actually solve some of these issues. And I don't know why. I mean, I know that a lot of, you know, the employers, say in the retail sector, are also National Party supporters, and maybe they're winding things up at National Party conferences. It doesn't make much economic sense. I mean, taking money out of the pockets of low-paid workers is not a great economic strategy. You want to put money into the pockets of people who are on the breadline so they buy more bread. That's better for the country.
Bill, David Lowe from the Employers and Manufacturers Association, good friend of yours, told Morning Report last month that these changes were necessary because some disputes simply dragged on too long. Are unions to blame for taking up too much time in dispute resolution?
Well, unpack it. What are the two most recent long-term disputes? The Auckland Waterfront employers attacking their own workers. Trying to contract out their work, casualise them, cut their pay. What do you think's going to happen? Join the dots. AFCO, locking out their workers, cut your pay.
Using hunger as a negotiating tactic.
So, you know, it's a bit rich for David Lowe to blame the good faith provisions of the bargaining law for these things. Can I just go back a bit? I find it quite fascinating. Lila touched on something really quite fascinating. When this national administration first came in, there was that dialogue around the Job Summit. John Key had immense political capital. He could have changed that kind of nexus in the National Party, that union bashing, beneficiary bashing kind of National Party kind of thing. And he could have really done something quite interesting about that. And they have just fallen back on the good old National Party stuff. I think, if anything, we're in for a period of union bashing just for them to try and claw back some percentage points in the opinion poll.
Thank you, panel. Let's wrap the show with the final word. Lila, your final word this week is?
Well, I felt exhilarated last week by the reaction of parents and teachers and so on to the class war, as they called it, the cuts in the number of frontline teachers and technology classes and so on. And I thought, why don't New Zealanders value our right to work and our rights at work as much as we value our right to a decent public education? You know, if we were as organised and sort of intuitive and quick to respond as teachers and parents and communities were, I don't think workers would get thumped around quite as much as they do in this country.
Amen. Bill, your final word this week is?
Two things, if I could. First day of bargaining today for our influential metals and manufacturing industry agreement. I'd like to name check our delegate team. They'll be watching this on TV tonight. So Kimberly, Ken, Billy and Penny. I hope you had a good day. And well done, Louisa and Rachel. Secondly, yes, there has been a lot of attention given around the class war. The other thing that's been going on recently is a review of industry training. And that's well overdue for a conclusion. Our great fear in the movement is that the government's going to do something ideological and stupid and destructive around industry training. Employers have to stand up to that. They can't leave it to unions and the opposition political parties to fix that. Employers are going to have to stand up to this government if they try and unpack industry training and destroy it.
Thank you, Lila. Thank you, Bill. That's it for the show. Check out our Facebook site for ongoing union campaigns and actions, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter account for all the latest show updates. Thank you for watching Aotearoa. Join us again 8 p.m. next Monday for the Union Report here on Triangle TV, the home of original public broadcasting. Good night, New Zealand.